This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Baruch Haba. We continue in the Mishna Berura Daf Hashavua. We're learning Siman tests. Yesterday we learned the Mishna Berura's conclusion and recommendation that one should try to fulfill the mitzvah midoraisa with a woolen garment. We're up to Seif Beis. Tzitzis shel pishtim oy shel tzemer rechelim. Poitrim b'chol minei begadim. Tzitzis of linen or wool of a ram, a pater, any type of garment, whatever the garment is made out of. Chutz mishal pishtim l'tzemer shel tzemer l'pishtim. Except for using linen strings on wool or wool strings on linen. Bizman hazeh, nowadays, the leka tchelas, that we don't have tchelas. Mibnei shehim klayim, because it's klayim. In other words, nowadays that we don't have tchelas, so the wool and linen really pater anything. The only thing is that's only if you're mekayim tzitzis properly. B'shleimos. But nowadays that we don't have tchelas, so therefore you can't put wool strings on linen. Haga, v'yeshamrim, some say shaloi lasit tzitzis shel pishtim klau, some say do not make tzitzis out of linen at all, afilu b'shar minim, even if let's say it's silk or some other kind of garment, v'hachinog, that is the minhag. So in other words, even though wool and linen is the wild card, and you could put wool strings or linen strings on anything, but some say don't use linen strings on anything, even on cotton, even on silk. Okay. Says the Mishna Berura Katan Vav, Shel Tzemer. Tzitzis of Pishtim or Tzemer Pater, anything, says the Mishna Berura, V'habach Kasaf, Kivan the Yesh Poiskim Al-Chamir Mezeh, Shel Elasis Afilu Tzitzis Shel Tzemer, L'Shar Minim, the Bach is even more stringent. He says not to make wool strings for other minim, Kivan Sheino Minoi, Kamavor Bebeis Yosef, Al Kein Lo Yavarich Rak Al Talis Tzemer, V'Tzitzis Tzemer. If you're going to use wool strings, it should only be on a woolen garment. It should not be on other material. Why? That's the chumrah of the Bach, that wool will not pater sharminim. The minhag oilam is that we do use wool strings for other minim. With the Sefer Eliyah Rabbah, Gam Kin Kasav Sheish L'Hakal B'Zeh. The Eliyah Rabbah also says you could be lenient. V'chein Mashma B'Sefer Masei Rav, that in fact wool would pater other minim. Again, for us this is basically academic. I think most people, either they have a wool garment with wool strings or they wear cotton. I'm not familiar with other types of material. Okay, Bizman Hazeh. Peirosh, the Bizman Shoyet Cheles. Back in the day when there was Cheles Shoyet Tzarch Lahatil, Arba Chutin, you had to make 4 strings. Shnei Chutei Lavan, 2 strings of white wool, Ushnei Chutei Tcheles, and 2 strings of blue wool, which is Hut Samar Tzavo B'dam Achilazoin. V'himeskayim al Yidei Zeh mitzvah tzitzis karoi, and by doing so you fulfilled the mitzvah of tzitzis properly. Hitira lanu ha-Torah, the Torah mattered, lahatil hashnayim shalavan bein mitzemra oy mipishtin. The Torah allowed you that the 2 white strings, the 2 blue strings, avadar wool, tcheles is blue wool. You don't put blue tcheles on pishtin. But the 2 white strings, the Torah allows them to be whether wool or linen. Bein beveget semer, oy beveget pishtin. On either a wool garment or a linen garment. So back in the day, when there was a mitzvah of tcheles, when mitzvah of tcheles was able to be fulfilled, so you could have the 2 white strings could be wool or linen, and the garment could be wool or linen. Ay shatnez. If you're mekayim tzitzis b'shlei musa, we're not worried about shatnez. The Torah says, "Le'sil b'shatnez gedilim tasalacha." Ulahayesh oimrim shazacharama b'sif aleph. According to the Yesh Oimrim, that the Ramah says in Sif Aleph, "D'cho minei begadim chayv medaraisa, afilu bahem." According to the Ramah Shita, very interesting, that let's say cotton is chayiv and tzitzis midoraisa, then technically you could have had 2 blue strings of wool and 2 white strings of linen. Aval achshav de'ein lanu tchelas. But nowadays that we don't have tchelas, nimsa de'ein lanu mekayim ha-mitzvah b'shleimusa. It comes out we're not mekayim the mitzvah b'shleimus. Lo shari lan klayim. Klayim is not permitted. Now, interesting, Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, he says that nowadays that we don't have tchelas, when you put on tzitzis, you should be misoinen. This is another kavanah to have when you put on the tzitzis. So first you're mechavein to mekayim the mitzvah to say the rice of wearing tzitzis. Number two, you're mechavein to you wear tzitzis laman tizkaru v'asisa miskol mitzvosai to wear tzitzis remember all the mitzvahs. Number three, you're mechavein to pater the talis katan. Number four, you're mechavein that if you were to take off the beged, then you could put it on again. Rabbi Yair added a fifth kavana from the Bir Halacha, but to keep it simple over here, another kavana would be, when you put on your tzitzis, you should moan, I wish I could fulfill tchelas. Then says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, you're accredited with the mitzvah of tchelas, because chishev lasois mitzvah venenas v'loy asa mala olav kilu asa. Okay, Siv Katan Ches afilu b'shar minim. Some say not to make tzitzis of linen at all, even for other species. Why? Hatam t'yesh semer shenira kein meshi. There's some wool, it looks like silk. So what you're going to do is you're going to put linen on what you think is silk, but really it's wool, and you're going to come to wear klayim. According to this, according to this, you could put linen on a cotton garment, because cotton doesn't look like wool. There are other reasons for this, and accordingly, you should not put linen on other types of garments. You could be samech on those who are lenient. Kain kasab el yaraba va'ayin b'sefer masarav. Look in the sefer masarav. Shehagra hayagam kain min hamakilim bezeh. The Gra was lenient regarding the putting pishtan on other garments. So I know everybody wants to know what do we say about the tcheles bizman hazeh. So that's an old subject, something we spent a lot of time on. You can listen to the shiurim on Torah anytime. The bottom line is, to me, the most authoritative tshuva on this is Rabbi Yashiv. Rabbi Yashiv didn't go for it. He had a number of reasons, one of them being that this is not the first discovery of a possible tcheles, and the first one was debunked, and the second one was debunked, and in all probability, time will come and they'll debunk this one as well. Plus, Rabbi Yashiv quoted the Ramah that on the tzad that it is not tcheles, you're not fulfilling tzitzis l'chachila, because the strings l'chachila, according to Ramah, should be the same color as the garment. Okay, for more information on this, you could look into the subject or listen to some of the shiurim on it. Siv Gimel. Tzitzis shel shar minim ein poichim el b'minim. Strings of tzitzis of other types, let's say cotton or silk, only pater their type. Kagoin meshi lebegen meshi, silk for silk. Tzamar gefen, cotton for cotton. Aval shaloi b'minim ein poichim. Cotton doesn't pater, not wool, not silk, not linen. Says the Mishna Berura shel shar. Din zakoi bein laman da amar shar min daraisa d'Rabbanan. This statement of the Mechaber is not getting involved whether shar minim are chayiv midairaisa or d'Rabbanan. You could take whatever tzad you want. You could go with the Mechaber that it's only shar minim are only chayiv midrabbanan. You could go like the Ramah that shar minim are chayiv midairaisa. Nevertheless, shar minim only pater their min. Says the Mishna Berura el b'minam v'im haya hashasi min zeh v'erev min acher. If the warp was from one species and the weft was from another. Basically, when you weave garments, there are two types of string: one that go horizontally, one that go vertically. So if one direction was, let's say, cotton, and the other direction was silk, pasha de'en l'talzu takana. This talis is as issues. This talis has issues. You can't put on the silk because it has some cotton. You can't put on the cotton because it has silk. The only thing you can do is now, according to the Bach that we mentioned earlier, you can't wear this garment because the Bach said not to put wool on other begadim. Oy b'tzitzis shel pishtam b'makam atchak v'chanal. Kagoin meshi, for example, silk. Says Mishna Berura, v'chol zedavkim ha'meshi ha'tavi b'shazo shem tzitzis. You can't just take a pair of silk that you bought in the bazaar that they're selling in the clothing district. It had to have been spun and twisted l'shem tzitzis ablav hachiloy, otherwise not. Sivkan yavez lebeged meshi v'afilu im tachta v'yataf or b'tsemer oy pishtim oy min acher. Let's say you have a silk garment and underneath there was a lining of wool or linen. We go after the top part. Alright, fine. Due to popular demand, we'll do the next Mishna Berura. Ein poitrin. We do not exempt, right? Other minim do not pater shaloi b'minim. Vitala shahashasiyu miminoi ve'erahu mitzemar lehepuch. Let's say a talis that the shasi, the warp strings, are from its species, and the erev is wool. So let's say the warp was cotton and the weft was wool, or vice versa. You should put on wool strings davka. Don't put on silk, because the silk is not going to pater the part of the beged which is wool, even if the majority of the beged was silk. Why? Because beged, the warp or the weft alone is not considered a beged. Even if, let's say, the strands of wool are not recognized on their own, let's say you have some woolen strings in the shasi and some in the erev, and you can't really tell where, and the majority is silk. Even so, you should still use woolen strings, even though the majority of the beged, both of the warp and the weft, are silk. Some say that strands are chashuv and they don't become batal. And you know what says the Mishna Berura? In this case, better to make the whole garment out of wool. And by doing so, you will be beautifying the mitzvah above. A talis that's a mix of cotton and linen. Why? You can't put on wool, bishanas. You can't put on linen because we said linen really doesn't pater other minim except for b'shas hadchak. Imloi b'shas hadchak yasa b'tzitzah shel pishtan v'chanal b'soif sivkatan ches. Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll see everybody Be'ezus Hashem Monday, and we might have to have a double header or two on an upcoming Sunday just to keep pace. Miss time in upcoming weeks. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Bracha v'atzlacha kol tov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.